The first time I saw her, the winter wind was cutting through the small town like a knife. I was walking past the diner after locking up my hardware store when movement caught my eye near the dumpster. There, crouched in the shadows, was a little girl, maybe 8 or 9. Her hair was tangled into knots, and her oversized sweater hung off her like it belonged to someone twice her size. In her trembling hands was a crumpled paper bag she girded as if it held treasure. My chest tightened at the sight. She looked up, startled, eyes wide like a deer. I slowed my steps, not wanting to scare her. "Hey, sweetheart," I said gently, crouching down a few feet away. She didn't answer, just tightened her grip on the bag. I could see her cheeks were hollow, her lips cracked from the cold. Without thinking, I reached into my bag from the diner and pulled out a sandwich and a small carton of milk. "It's okay," I told her softly. "You can have these." She stared at them, suspicion flickering in her eyes, before slowly stretching out a shaking hand. When she took the food, she didn't say a word. She clutched them to her chest like they were the most precious things in the world, then bolted into the night without looking back. I stood there in the cold. The image of her small figure running down the alley burned into my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering where she'd gone, if she was safe, if she even had somewhere to stay. My heart ached in a way I couldn't explain. The following days, I found myself glancing toward the diner's back alley each evening. Part of me hoped she'd be there again so I could give her something more, a blanket, a warm drink, maybe even a chance to sit inside, but she never came. Life in a small Arizona town has its rhythms, and after a while, I tried to convince myself I'd probably never see her again. Still, something about that little girl's eyes haunted me. It was 5 days later when I heard the knock. It was early evening, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in dusty gold. I opened the door, and there she was, her small frame framed against the fading light. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a woman, maybe in her late 20s, with tired eyes and hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed. In daze, the girl clung to her hand, looking up at me with the same wary gaze. "This is my mom," she said in a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. We don't have anywhere to go. Can we stay here?" My breath caught. The woman didn't meet my eyes at first. Her gaze was fixed on the porch boards as if ashamed. I could see the lines of exhaustion on her face, the way her shoulders slumped under a weight heavier than any physical burden. The little girl squeezed her mother's hand tighter, as if afraid I'd turn them away. I stepped aside without thinking. "Come in," I said, my voice more certain than I felt. They hesitated, then crossed the threshold. My house isn't big, just a modest 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a wood stove that needs coaxing, but that night, it felt warmer than ever. The girl's eyes darted around, landing on the soft glow of the stove. The shelves lined with old books, the smell of fresh bread I'd baked earlier. Her mom stood near the door, still tense, as if ready to leave at any second. I motioned toward the kitchen table. "Sit," I said gently. "I'll make you both something warm." But the girl slid into a chair without letting go of her mom's hand. I poured them hot soup from the pot on the stove, added slices of bread, and set 2 glasses of water in front of them. They ate quietly at first, the only sound, the clink of spoons against bowls. But I noticed the way the little girl's shoulders relaxed with every bite. When the meal was done, I offered them the couch for the night. "It's not much, but it's warm," I said. The woman finally looked at me then, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "We'll be gone in the morning." I just nodded, though inside I knew I didn't want them to leave. I didn't know their story yet, but something told me it wasn't one anyone should face alone, especially not a little girl who scavenged for food behind a diner. That night, I lay in bed listening to the faint sound of their breathing from the living room. The little girl's laugh from earlier, just a small one when I'd set the bread on the table, owed in my mind. It was fragile, like it hadn't been used in a long time, but it carried a warmth I couldn't shake. I realized then that in just a few short hours, 2 strangers had managed to change something inside me. When morning came, I found them still asleep on the couch, wrapped in the blanket I'd left out. The girl was curled up against her mom, a faint smile on her lips. I stood there for a moment, coffee in hand, and knew that whatever had brought them to my door wasn't just chance. Maybe it was need, maybe it was fate. All I knew was that I couldn't let them walk back out into the cold with nothing and no one. Not again. They woke late that morning, the sunlight spilling across the living room. The girl blinked against it, her hair sticking up in all directions, while her mom sat up slowly, clearly embarrassed to have slept so long. "You didn't have to let us stay," the woman said softly. I waved it off, sliding a plate of pancakes onto the table. I wanted to. The girl's eyes lit up at the sight, and for the first time, I saw something new, hope flickering. She reached for the syrup with a little smile, and I felt my heart tighten in the best way. Over breakfast, I learned their names. The girl was Emily, her mom was Claire. They'd been living in a beat-up sedan for weeks after Claire lost her job, and their apartment in Phoenix. I thought we could make it somewhere cheaper, Claire admitted, but the car broke down 2 towns over. She said they'd been walking, stopping in places to ask for help, but pride had kept her from going to a shelter. Emily just stared at her pancakes, quiet, as if afraid speaking might make this temporary safety vanish. After they ate, I showed them the small guest room at the back of the house. It wasn't much, just a bed, a dresser, and a faded quilt my grandmother had sewn, but when Emily saw it, she gasped. "Can we stay here for a little while?" she asked before her mom could speak. Claire hesitated, clearly torn between gratitude and shame. I could see the battle in her eyes. "For as long as you need," I said before she could answer. The relief on both their faces made my throat tighten. That day passed quietly. Emily explored the backyard, laughing as she tried to follow the barn cat, while Claire helped me fix a loose shutter. We didn't talk much about the past, but I noticed how she moved, always aware of her daughter's location, always scanning the edges of the yard as if expecting danger to step out of the trees. When I offered to drive them into town to get groceries, Claire's hand tightened briefly on Emily's shoulder, and she politely declined. It wasn't until that evening, when Emily was asleep, that Claire opened up. She told me about her ex, how he'd been charming at first, then controlling, then violent. How she'd finally taken Emily and left in the middle of the night with just the clothes on their backs. She hadn't gone to the police, afraid they wouldn't believe her or that he'd find them anyway. I needed to keep her safe, she whispered, eyes wet. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. The next week felt like something from another life. Emily began to laugh more, her shoulders less hunched, her voice a little louder each day. She followed me into the workshop one afternoon, curious about the birdhouse I was building. Before I knew it, she was handing me nails, holding the wood, steady, and proudly showing Claire the finished product. "We should hang it out back," Emily suggested. Her mom smiled, a real smile this time, and for a moment, they both looked like they belonged here. Still, there were shadows. I noticed how Claire always kept her phone off, how she avoided the main street in town. One night, I found her on the porch, staring at the dark road, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "You're safe here," I said quietly. She looked at me, her expression equal parts gratitude and fear. "Safe doesn't last," she replied. I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing: I'd do everything I could to make it last for them, no matter what it took. 2 weeks in, a storm rolled through, knocking out the power. Emily squealed when I lit the old oil lamps, turning the darkened house into a golden glow. We sat at the table playing cards, listening to rain drum the roof. At one point, Emily leaned against me, yawning. "I like it here," she murmured sleepily. Claire caught my eye over the flickering lamplight, her lips parting as if to speak, but she stayed silent. The unspoken words hung between us like the hum of the rain outside. It was a Tuesday morning when trouble found us. I was restocking shelves in the hardware store when I saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, scanning the street like a predator. I'd never seen his face before, but something about the way he moved set alarms off in my gut. Later that day, Claire confirmed it in a trembling voice. "It's him," she said, staring out the window. My stomach turned. "We needed a plan." "I'm not letting him take you back," I told her. The fear in her eyes told me she wasn't sure anyone could stop him. The next 48 hours were tense. I moved them into my bedroom for safety, keeping my shotgun loaded by the door. The sheriff, an old friend, promised to patrol the road near my place. Still, every creak of the porch boards, every rustle in the trees made my heart pound. Emily didn't understand why she couldn't go outside. Claire tried to make it feel like a game, but I could see the cracks in her calm. At night, she barely slept, sitting in the chair by the window, watching. When it finally happened, it was fast. Late Friday night, headlights swept across the yard, stopping at the gate. I was already at the door before the truck engine cut off. My friend the sheriff stepped out, motioning for me to come forward. "We've got him," he said. Relief washed over me like a wave. He explained they'd arrested Claire's ex on outstanding charges from another county. He wouldn't be coming here again, not legally, anyway. When I told Claire, she just sank into the couch, burying her face in her hands as silent sobs shook her shoulders. The days after felt lighter. Claire began helping me at the hardware store a few hours a week. Emily started at the small local school, returning each day with stories about new friends and playground adventures. The house felt different now, not just a place for me, but a home for all three of us. I realized somewhere along the way that I didn't think about them leaving anymore. The idea felt wrong, like taking sunlight out of a sky that had only just learned to shine again. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Claire stood with me on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the warm air. "You didn't have to take us in," she said quietly. I looked at her, the porch light catching the curve of her smile. "Maybe not," I replied, "but I wanted to. And now I can't imagine this place without you." She didn't answer, but her hand brushed mine. lingering just long enough to tell me she felt the same. That night. Lying in bed, I thought about how it had all started with a starving little girl behind a diner. I'd thought I was giving her food, maybe a small moment of kindness. I hadn't realized she'd bring her mother, her laughter, and a sense of family I hadn't known I was missing. In saving them from the cold, they'd given me something warmer than I'd ever had before, a reason to come home at the end of the day. And I wasn't letting that go.